Hi guys, my name is Karthik and I am from ExecuteAutomation.com and welcome to the next section of our Execute Automation reporting system as well as Execute Automation test harness system course. So in this section, we'll be talking about building Earth's UI layer, and in this video, we'll be talking about setting stage ready. And as you can see, this time we have our Visual Studio logo also enabled, and the reason is because we will be using Visual Studio and SQL Server simultaneously in this whole course. Alright, so let's get started. What knowledge do one should have before starting this section? Well, basic of HTML, ASP.NET and C# should be good enough to start this section, but you will also require some of the advanced concept of understanding how the DOM is being rendered. So what we are going to build here is this, the Execute Automation reporting system UI, and this will be getting data from the backend that we have created in our previous video. Looks neat and cool, right? The reason is because Air has few usage of JavaScript as well as CSS. So you need to also have some of the knowledge on JavaScript since we will be doing some kind of client-side validation, and CSS for the styles that you are seeing in the UI as you can see here. So there will be a little usage of jQuery as well as JavaScript here and there in our Execute Automation reporting systems UI, but it is not much. We will be using a very few as compared to a bigger sites. So for setting our stage ready, we need to ensure that you have the Visual Studio with ASP.NET application installed in that, and also iOS 8.0 and above running in your machine. If you have Windows 10, then probably you should be having iOS 10 or above. So let's get started, guys. So for building our Air's UI, or otherwise called as Execute Automation reporting system, I'm going to work with Visual Studio. So I'm just going to open Visual Studio 2015, and I have Visual Studio 2015 Enterprise Edition installed in my machine. So you can also use Visual Studio Community Edition if you want. So my Visual Studio 2015 is open right now. So the first thing which I'm going to do is I'm going to create a project, and this time I'm going to create a project called as Visual Studio Web Project, and which is available right here within your web, and you have something called as ASP.NET Web Application, right? So I'm going to choose this, and I'm going to select a folder f:/udemy reporting, right? And then I'm going to give a name here. So the name of our project is nothing but Earth, or otherwise called as Execute Automation reporting system, right? So I'm going to give that name, and then I'm going to just hit OK. So this is going to create a project for me, and before that it's going to ask me a template saying whether I want to choose the available MVC template or empty template or a web form template or single page application, something like that. You can choose any of them you want. So I'm going to choose empty in that because this is a template that does not contain any of the content in it, and it will also have a checkbox here saying web form. I'm going to choose that so that it's going to be a web form project for me, and then I'm going to hit OK. And now you can see in our Execute Automation reporting system solution, we have a project Earth, and there are some of the reference automatically added which is required for building a ASP.NET web application. And there is a app_data folder and models folder, and you can see everything is currently empty. You don't have anything in here. The models is empty, and the web.config also does not contain any useful information other than the compiler informations. So this is a pretty plain empty Visual Studio project that we have created. So I am going to add some of the web form for our project this time. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to right click the models folder, and there is an option called add, and you can see there is a new item, or there is also an option called web form with master page and web forms master page. So you can choose any of them, but first time let's select this new item, and within this particular dialog box let's choose the web form, and you can see there is something called web form right here. This option, this is what we're interested in. So I'm going to choose that, and let's give a interesting name, maybe index.aspx, and hit add. So this is going to add a web form for us within this particular project. And let's quickly see if we could get our plain old hello world message. So let's say I'm just going to type a h3 of hello world to ensure that everything works fine. So I'm just going to hit run. So this is actually going to run the application in Firefox browser. And you can see we have a message, hello world, which means everything is okay until now. The project is pretty cool, and the execution is also happening as expected, which is great. So the next thing we need to do is let's add a quick grid by connecting to the database that we have within our ERS database that we created in our previous section, and see how things works. So for that, I'm going to go to the index.aspx, and there is something called as design. So I'm going to choose that this time. And here, instead of this hello world, let's completely delete this, and I'm just going to add the data grid here. So for that, I'm going to go to the toolbox, and you can search for data grid, and you can see that there is a grid view within this data, and just you can drop this, right? See, I'm not going to write even a single line of code to connect to our ERS database, and you can see everything I'm going to do using the wizard. So there is an option called grid view task, and within this grid view task we have something called choose data source. So actually I'm going to choose the data source, which is nothing but our ExecuteAutomation reporting systems database, which we created in our previous section. So I'm going to choose the new data source, and this is going to show me a dialog box or wizard asking me to choose the data source type. So the data source type is nothing but our SQL Server database. So I'm going to choose that, and you can specify any of the identification name for this particular data source if you want. So I'm just going to leave it as it is for now, and then I'm just going to hit OK. Since I have promised you that I will not be adding even a single line of code, so I'm just going to leave everything as it is. And there is something called new connection button, so I'm just going to click that, and there is a server name. So you can choose any of the name you want, which is the server name that is running your machine. And I'm going to give localhost this time, and if I choose the database, you can see our database will be listed, which is nothing but our ERS database. So I'm just going to type ERSDB. You can see our ERSDB will be listed here, and if I test the connection, you can see that the test connection is succeeded, which is great. And then I'm going to hit OK, and then you can see that it has connected to our database. And you can see if I click this particular plus sign of the connection string, it will also show the connection string which has been created, which is great. And then I'm going to hit next, ask whether this is okay for this particular connection string. I'm going to hit next, and this will show all the tables which is required for connecting. But currently I'm not interested in the details table, rather I'm interested in the TBL test cycle table, which is what is pretty interesting for me right now. So I'm going to select that, and then I'm going to choose the application under test name, executed by, requested by, build number, application version. That's it. These are the columns which I'm very interested in to show in my data grid. So I'm going to choose all of them, and then I'm going to hit next, and I'm going to test the query. You can see that currently it yields no return result. The reason is because there is no value inside in our database yet. So I'm going to choose finish. This way you can see that it has automatically created a very cool grid for us with no data inside that, which is okay because there is no value yet. So let's quickly add some of the value in our database table that we created in our previous section of this course. So instead of running the query using the plain old insert statement, I'm going to use our, remember we have written something called as create test cycle store procedure. So I'm just going to call that guy sp_create test cycle, and you can see that it expects us to pass the application under test name. So I'm just going to give the application under test as the EA employee app. If you have already watched the courses like advanced automation testing framework development with Selenium C# or coded UI testing advanced automation framework development in our Udemy videos, you will know there is something called as EA employee app. So I'm going to give the same name here, and then executed by, I'm going to give as Karthik. You don't even have to pass the parameters if you want, and then you can give the name here as any name. So it's myself, and then I'm going to give the build number, and the build number is going to be, let's say 1.0, and the application version is 1.0 as well. So I'm just going to give that, and the machine name is going to be, let's say, my Windows 10. And the test type, you don't really have to pass. It can be even empty, but as of now, I'm just going to pass as 1. And now if I try to execute this particular stored procedure, it will throw you an error. The reason is because I have already passed something like parameter name is equal to. So let's delete that practice. You have to either use any one of the way that you want to, and this one is going to be 1. And now if I execute the stored procedure, you can see that 1 row has been affected, and the reason is because we have inserted a value into the TBL test cycle table. So if I try to select the top 1000 rows, you can see that the value is actually inserted and the data of execution is automatically inserted, and this is because we have inserted this from the stored procedure automatically, right? And now we want our ExecuteAutomation reporting system UI to display this particular value, right? So if I try to run this particular application, you can see that we have a very normal grid, which also displays the values: EA employee app, executed by Karthik, requested by myself, build number is 1.0, and the application is 1.0. So it seems like we are pretty close to what we are actually building, right? So if you think that you want to add some kind of designing stuff for this, there is also some of the inbuilt themes available for this particular grid. So if you click this particular arrow here, there is an option called auto format. You can choose that, and you can choose any one of the options here, like colorful, simple, professional, autumn, but I like professional, so I'm going to choose that. I'm going to hit apply, and then I'm going to hit OK. And then if I try to run this in Firefox once again, you can see that this time the grid will look little okay compared to our previous grid. Looks good, right? So this is how you can retrieve the data right from your database into your application. So in the next video, we will talk how to modify this particular piece of code into much more efficient as well as customizable code.